This is why you should be careful who you talk to online. When I was 15 and getting into my junior year, I created a Twitter account. I didn't tell anyone my username, including my family or friends. I also didn't upload any pictures or specify my exact location, and I put a different city than where I lived. I had around 30 followers and I didn't follow many people. One evening in October, someone sent me a weird direct message. They had 200 followers and the message read, "Hi, I'm Rob and I just turned 17. I wanted to know if you lived in the city because I'm moving there and I'm going to that high school soon. I'd like to make some new friends." I immediately thought something was wrong because nowhere in my profile did I list my actual town, but I remembered a tweet I made a few weeks ago about buses in which I mentioned my city. I was bored and he was polite, so we started talking. The discussion was mainly about high school teachers and cafeteria food. As it got later in the night, he started asking more personal questions like if I lived far from the school or if I was ever home alone. I never answered these questions because it was too shady for me. The next day we talked again and started bonding. We had a 2-week vacation in October, and at the end of it is when he finally told me that he would be attending my high school. I was so excited to finally meet him. Part 2 of why you should be careful who you talk to online. He asked to pick a place to meet during the morning break on our first day back to school after break. I was so happy to meet him and told him to join me in the hall. However, when he realized people would be around, he said he'd rather meet me in an isolated place because he might not recognize me in a crowd. It was a good enough excuse for me, and I told him to meet me in the 3rd floor bathroom because we weren't allowed to stay there during breaks and no one would disturb us. In my head, it seemed a little creepy, but since we were in school, I was confident that nothing bad could happen. I dressed up and made myself really pretty and counted down the minutes till we met. When he arrived, it was him. He wasn't a catfish, but he looked a little older than 17. We talked and got along so well, and at the end of it, he asked me to go to lunch with him. I refused because I didn't have money and wouldn't let anyone pay for me. He seemed disappointed but offered to walk me home after class. I told him I have to take the bus, but he could walk me there. This became a routine for another 2 months. One day, I complained about how lonely I'd be at home as everyone in my family was going to be out that day. I know it was reckless, but I thought I could trust him by this point. That evening, he walked me to the bus stop. I waved goodbye and put my headphones in. Little did I know that my life was in danger. Part 3 of why you should be careful who you talk to online. When I got off, I had a weird gut feeling that someone was watching me. Since it was December, it was already dark by the time that I had gotten off the bus. I paused my music but kept my earphones in not to draw suspicion. It was silent in my suburban neighborhood, especially at night. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I knew someone was following me. As quietly as possible, I reached for my keys in my pocket. As soon as I pulled them out, I ran. It was the best and fastest sprint of my life. I somehow managed to open and close the door before he could reach me. I deactivated the alarm and looked through the glass panel on the door. It wasn't a peephole but a whole window, so if someone wanted to see inside the house, they could. Standing there looking at me with the creepiest face was Rob. He followed me home, probably with a car, and I was paralyzed. We stared at each other for a minute before I ran to the kitchen to grab a knife. When I got back to the door, he was still there and started banging. I feared the glass would break, but it didn't. After 5 minutes, he stopped and went around the house banging on every shutter until he came back to the door. He looked angry, but my neighbor's car pulled in and he ran off, probably thinking it was my family. After this, he harassed me online, which finally made me delete my Twitter. No one even knew or heard of him, which is probably why he looked older. I never heard of him again, but I still wonder what could have happened that night.
If you ever want to wear a wig, don't do what she did. Talia bought a wig one day that didn't fit, but instead of returning it, she did something that quickly became terrifying. She came up with an unusual idea. This was her first mistake. She searched for ways to alter the wig herself. Then she went into her mother's room, took out a sewing kit, and began working. But Talia actually decided to put the wig on first and sew it in front of a mirror. She thought this would make sure the size was perfect. Afterwards, she was actually really satisfied with the result. Then that night, Talia went to take the wig off, but the wig seemed to feel much tighter than before. But she had school early tomorrow, so with one pull, she took the wig off. Then, without looking, she put it in her closet. That night, she woke up to a wet sound ringing in her ear. She tried to go back to sleep, but realized that her dog had come onto her bed. She pet her dog and went back to sleep. It wasn't a big deal. But the next morning, she noticed something strange in her closet. The wig didn't look the way it did before. It was covered in pieces of blood and skin. Then Talia went into the bedroom and turned around. She realized that she had sewn her own scalp into the wig, then ripped it off. In the back of her head, she could see her own skull. Then she realized why there was a wet sound ringing in her ears last night, and she began screaming.
This is why you should always share your location with a friend. A girl named Amanda was getting ready for prom and started putting some makeup on. Her phone begins to vibrate and she's getting a call from one of her friends named Sylvia. Sylvia calls and tells her that the car broke down and that she should just Uber. Amanda, feeling sad, says, "Okay, I'll just Uber." She calls the Uber and 10 minutes later a car pulls up. She gets in the car and the driver is very quiet. As they're driving, she tells the driver to get on the interstate, but he completely ignores her and keeps driving straight. He makes about every turn and goes on every back road you could possibly think of. Amanda begins to feel worried because she has no idea where she's at and she feels like he's taking her to the wrong location. Her phone starts to vibrate and it's a call from an unknown number, but she ignores it since she doesn't know who it is. As she declines the call, the driver pulls into a dark alley and he gets out of the car. Amanda starts to panic when her phone vibrates one last time and she receives a text message. The text message said, "Hey, it's your Uber. I tried to call, but I'm here." Amanda was never seen again. If you guys want to see more stories like this, make sure to like and follow.
If you're ever driving late at night, don't do what they did. 2 boys picked up a girl on the side of the road while they were on their way to a school dance. In the car, she kept saying that she was cold, so one of the boys gave her his jacket. But when the night ended and they were about to drop her off, the girl accidentally left with the jacket. So the boys said that they would just come back the next day to get it. But when they came back and knocked on her door, they discovered something that would make them question what is real and what isn't. An old woman opened the door and asked them who they were looking for. After talking to her for a while, it was revealed that the girl they found on the side of the road was her daughter. But the thing is, she had been dead for 12 years. She was killed in a car accident at the same street corner they first saw her. The old woman pointed to a cemetery down the road and said, "That's where we buried her." The boys didn't believe her at first. They'd spent the whole night with this girl, so they knew that she had to be real. But they went to the cemetery and saw the boy's jacket draped over a gravestone. And on the gravestone was the girl's name and the date of her death, exactly 12 years ago to the day.
Take a look at your old photos, for you might catch a glimpse of the man with the upside down face. The upside down man is one of the most meanest and evil monsters. He loves to cause pain and death in order to feed off that energy. Photos from the 1910s to the 1960s started appearing online, and they look just like tragic events until you look closely at the background and you see the monster. He is not able to cause tragic events, but he is able to make the situation worse, like making arguments turn violent and blowing out tires to cause an accident. If you guys like monsters, scary stories, and lore, please support this video by liking it. Thank you.